Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7. I'm Gordon Ross. Yesterday was a historic day in Parliament. The day before was a historic day in Parliament. And today we see another day of high drama in the capital. Today we see the amendments being moved, first of all, for the Brexit Article 50 extension. 2 days ago, Mrs May's deal was defeated heavily for a second time in the House of Commons in a crushing defeat, which really set Mrs May back on her heels. Yesterday, Parliament voted to rule out a no-deal Brexit, and it was an emphatic vote to rule it out, much to many people's great relief. However, today, Parliament has concentrated its efforts on the amendments, first of all, to the Article 50 extension. And this is a piece of legislation which will allow the British government to have a longer period of time before Brexit comes into effect in which to come up with a new deal which the rest of the parties in the United Kingdom can get behind. Now, at the moment, the amendments have been read and the votes have taken place. I can now tell you a little bit more about what happened today. For those of you who've not been following the progress today through Parliament, it was lengthy, it was at times quite heated, but the following I can tell you straight away, that the various amendments which were made to the Brexit Article 50 extension bill or motion, first of all, were made by the Tory Dr. Sarah Wollaston, and her amendment, Amendment H, was defeated heavily, and this was an amendment which was seeking to delay for a new referendum, which would have Remain as an option. And it was defeated by 334 no votes against the ayes 85. So it was a heavy defeat, but it's not necessarily indicative of exactly how people would vote when faced with this option later on. However, Amendment I think it is, we have some disagreement over whether it's H or I, but this is the Labour MP Hilary Benn's amendment, and this was to allow the Commons to debate the next steps of Brexit on Wednesday next week. The amendment by Lucy Powell was also to limit the date to the 30th of June, a strangely arbitrary figure which has puzzled many commentators. However, the ayes for this particular amendment, 302, the noes, 318, so that also was defeated. And that takes us to Amendment E by Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. Now, Jeremy Corbyn's amendment notes the rejection by Parliament of Mrs May's Brexit plan and says the government should provide parliamentary time for this House to find a majority for a different approach. Now, this amendment, Amendment E, had 302 for aye and the noes 318. So again, the Labour motion was defeated. Amendment J by Bryant was not moved. It was noted in a guide to parliamentary procedure. Erskine May states that a motion or amendment which is the same in substance as a question which has been decided in the affirmative or negative may not be brought forward again during that session. So that was not moved on a point of order. And finally, the main motion this evening. And this main motion says that the House will seek to agree with the European Union an extension of the period of the specified. We have a typographical error here. I'll read this myself. The House will seek to agree with the European Union an extension to the period specified in Article 5. If the House passes the resolution on the negotiated withdrawal framework by the 20th of March 2019, then the government will seek with the EU a one-off extension for passing the necessary EU exit to end on the 30th of June 2019. So the 30th of June would be the latest date that the British government would have in which to find a new solution to this Brexit conundrum. If the House had not passed the resolution by the 20th of March 2019, then the European Council will likely, at its meeting the following day, require a clear purpose for any extension, not least to determine its length, and that any extension beyond the 30th of June 2019 would require the United Kingdom to hold elections. Now, these are EU elections, where the United Kingdom would be in the humiliating position of having to put up candidates for election to the European Union, a union which they are attempting to leave. So a situation which many Brexiters would find deeply humiliating and embarrassing. And now to the result of the main motion. And we can see that the ayes have 412 votes and the noes 202. So the main motion has been carried. Brexit will be delayed until, at the latest, the 30th of June 2019. And so we now find ourselves in a period of hiatus yet again, as the British government has again kicked the can down the street for another 2-3 months. Some people are a little mystified about why it is the 30th of let me just check this, make sure we've got the right date. The 30th of June 2019, because this will put us into the territory where we actually have to choose candidates and start campaigning for a European Union election. So it is a puzzling time to be ending the whole process of deciding what to do about Brexit. The question still remains, though, why is it after over 2 years of constant negotiations between the Conservative government and then Mrs May's own personal efforts herself in Europe to negotiate a deal, why is it after 2 years that the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats and no other parties in the UK at all have come up with a credible alternative plan? It seems as if these parties are actually waiting for the Tories to fail in this and perhaps they're waiting to pounce and hold a general election, and that has perhaps been their game all along. Some people have speculated, and it is only speculation, that it has always been the government's scheme to run down the clock and end up with a no-deal Brexit. And it is still technically possible for a no-deal Brexit to happen. Mrs May now has to go to the European Union and to formally request, on behalf of the British government, an extension to the Article 50 period, not longer than the 30th of June this year. So an unenviable task again for a Prime Minister who has been repeatedly humiliated by her own party and the parties of opposition. There are some puzzling instances in the voting patterns. Nobody is quite sure why the Labour Party has abstained on some things and not on others. The earlier move by the SNP and Plaid Cymru to have Article 50 completely revoked to stop Brexit was not selected by the Speaker and has fallen. So that amendment was not moved. So the chances of Article 50 being stopped are no more. I'm afraid we are not going to see an end to that. I've just been handed a bulletin. Forgive me. Okay. All right, now this is just off the presses from the SNP. Now the SNP have just announced that, or warned against rolling back on devolution with the latest power grab plans. So this is a different story. Now we're moving away from Brexit and back towards what's happening in Scotland itself. The SNP Treasury spokeswoman, Alison Thewliss MP, warned that control over spending decisions on Scotland's £158 million share of the Stronger Towns Fund must remain at Holyrood. A recent report advised that the UK Government Treasury is actively seeking to bypass the Scottish Parliament over spending controls. So it looks as if there is another power grab being planned. The new £1.6 billion Stronger Towns Fund is designed to bring investment into economically depressed communities across the UK. It will invite bids directly from local councils, including in Scotland. £1 billion has already been ring-fenced for England, mainly in the north areas where they vote for Brexit. Claims from critics have been made that this is a bung to Labour MPs in order to have them vote for the Prime Minister's deal. Now, it should be pointed out, just before I move on from this particular phrase here, the Prime Minister's deal, that there is now still the chance that Mrs May will put her deal again next week before the House for yet a third vote on her negotiated deal with the European Union. It's not certain yet whether this will happen, but it appears likely that she will do this. We'll come back to that story perhaps later on. And now back to the story of the Stronger Towns Fund. Claims from critics have been made, as I say, that this is a bung to Labour MPs because they have a large number of Brexit voters in their constituencies in the north. Under established convention, additional local government spending in England would usually result in a windfall for devolved administrations through the Barnett formula. The Barnett formula sees spending made in England equalled through a complicated system of percentages which allows Scots councils to get a fraction of the same amount given to their councils, known as the Barnett consequentials. Alison Thewlis has said the move is an outrageous Tory power grab for the Scottish Parliament, which would roll back devolution and could shortchange the Scottish budget by more than £150 million. Control over Scottish Parliament spending decisions must be made in Holyrood, not stolen and hoarded by a detached Tory government in Westminster that is acting against the interests of Scotland and threatening massive damage to our economy as a result of Brexit. Moving on now, Green MSP John Finney has today called in the Scottish Government to instruct a statutory public inquiry into drugs deaths in Scotland. 934 drug-related deaths in 2017, comparison to 146 road traffic deaths. The figure for 2018 is expected to be even higher. Mr Finney said, given the scale of this public health crisis, the Scottish Government must urgently hold a public inquiry and commit to acting on its findings in order to end this ongoing tragedy. And now to news of Scotland's record high exports. Scotland's overseas food and drinks exports increased by £293 million in 2018, a record high of £6.3 billion in total. HMRC statistics show whisky exports have increased to £338 million, with a total value of around £4.7 billion in food exports, and have shown strong signs of growth in the longer term, increasing by £885 million since 2007. Commenting, the Rural Economy Secretary Fergus Ewing said, food and drink is one of Scotland's biggest success stories. These statistics highlight the importance of the sector's growth in recent years and are a testament to the unique collaboration between government and industry and a hard work and enterprise of business all over Scotland. And now to some different matters. In relation to events in Ireland in 1972, the so-called Bloody Sunday massacres, in fact, it was announced today that only one British soldier will be charged in relation to the events of Bloody Sunday. The police prosecution service says there's insufficient evidence to charge another 16 soldiers and 2 IRA soldiers. Soldier F, as his codename is given, faces charges for the attempted murders of Patrick O'Donnell, Joseph Friel, Joe Mann and Michael Quinn. He faces charges of murdering William McKinney and James Ray, neither of whom posed any threat. William McKinney, a keen photographer, the 27-year-old printer set out to film the march with a camera that he'd got as a Christmas present. And James Ray, a 22-year-old, went to Mass with his family before they attended the march together. Families of the victims have said that they were disappointed with the ruling. The UK government will cover legal expenses and support Soldier F. And now to talk about Brexit once more. So to recap today, in a historic day for the House of Commons, the Brexit saga has come to at least a brief halt for the time being while the various parties in the UK consider what to do next. But it seems obvious to everybody that Mrs May's existing deal with the European Union is very unlikely to pass a third reading. However, that's not to say the third reading will not happen. It's widely believed that the bill will get a third reading and there will be a third vote. This time, the option is still going to be Mrs. May's deal or no deal at all. And there will still be a clock running down. It will just be running a little bit longer until the 30th of June, at which point we will be obliged to start choosing candidates and running a general election for the European Union's MEP seats. We expect fun and games next week when Mrs. May comes back to Parliament with the same deal yet again, expecting a different result. There will, of course, be other amendments to be made to Mrs. May's deal, and the other parties are currently considering how best to change what has already been agreed with the European Union in a move which baffles many ordinary people, since they've now had 2 years in which to consider any changes they could have made to this kind of deal. And it surprised many people that both the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats and UKIP have failed consistently to come up with any different plan to that of Mrs. May. And that is about all we have time for this evening on Scotland at 7. We look forward to seeing you next week when I'll be hosting the show again in Scotland at 7. And from all of us here at Broadcasting Scotland, good night.